into the details of the characteristics of the hypocrites and how Allah Jalla Jalaluhu deals with them in this world and in the hereafter. Perhaps, again, I'm not an expert in previous revelations to say that I have read all of them, I know them very well, but based on my knowledge, from what I know, there is more direct verses talking about their characteristics, the hypocrites' characteristics, and the way how God deals with them in the Quran than in any other previous revelation that was sent. And we can see why when we talk about the life of a Nabi alayhi salatu salam and the struggle that him and his community had to go through, then we understand why the Quran talks a lot about their characteristics and the way how God deals with them. If you remember last Saturday, we talked about the kafirin. Inna alladhina kafaru sawa'un alayhim a'andartahum. So whether you warn or you warn not the people of kufr, people of disbelief, they're not going to believe pretty much. أَنذَرْتَهُمْ أَمْ لَمْ تُنذِرْهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. They're not going to believe. And then we talked about ختم الله على قلوبهم, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sealed their hearts. So today we're going to stop, we're going to comment on the other verses. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ. This is ayah number 8. يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى في سورة البقرة أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ومن الناس من يقول آمنا بالله وباليوم الآخر وما هم بمؤمنين يخادعون الله والذين آمنوا وما يخدعون إلا أنفسهم وما يشعرون في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا ولهم عذاب أليم بما كانوا يكذبون. These are only 2 ayahs, up to ayah 10. And then it goes on. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ قَالُوا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ أَلَا إِنَّهُمْ هُمُ الْمُفْسِدُونَ وَلَكِنْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسِ قالوا ونؤمن كما آمن السفهاء ألا إنهم هم السفهاء ولكن لا يعلمون. So let's try to go up to ayah number 13. I don't know if we can, but let's give it a try. There is not a lot of, in these verses that we're going to do tonight, there is not a lot of details that get complicated. There are some details for sure that we find in the books of Tafsir, but they're not complicated details, so they should be easy to be understood. First ayah, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَقُولُ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ. And there are from the people those who say that we believe in Allah. وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. And also in the day of judgment, in the last day. وَمَا هُمْ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. But in reality, they're not believers. They're not believers in what? In Allah, and they're not believers in the day of judgment. So what do we see in this verse right here, in this ayah? There are those who say that we believe in God and in the last day, but in reality, they're not believers. Right here we see that Allah is dealing with hypocrites. Right? So we have hypocrites right there. So the first sign of hypocrisy is when somebody says, I believe, we're talking about hypocrisy in religion, right? I believe, and they, inside of them, they don't believe. That's why scholars of Aqidah, and particularly the Maturidis, they mentioned that in order for your belief to be sound, you have to have tasdeeq, to verify that belief in Allah, in the Day of Judgment, in prophets, in Quran, all of these articles of faith, بِقَلْبِك, with your heart. You have to have tasdeeq in your heart. A verification of that belief. In other words, believe with your heart. But also, you have to utter that. This is a mu'min kamil. This is the perfect believer. Now, you see the phenomenon, what happens with munafiqeen, with these hypocrites. They say something, in other words, they appear as believers, they're affirming that they believe, but they're not necessarily affirming that with their heart. And that's where the difference is between the true believer and somebody who is a hypocrite. Now, according to our understanding, according to the understanding of scholars, Islamic scholars, and according to verse of the Quran, of course, and many hadiths of the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, we understand that hypocrisy is worse than kufr. إن المنافقين في الدرك الأسفل من النار. Indeed, those hypocrites, they are in the lowest part of the fire. Why so? Because they appear as they are believers, but in reality, they don't believe, and on top of it, they bring harm through this portrayal, through this way of lying, right? And we know that according to the history of Islam, they brought so much problems to Prophet ﷺ and the community. Versus a non-believer or a believer of a different faith. You know that they're not with you. Like if we go back to the history again, we talk about kuffar, of Quraysh, for example, the mushrikeen or kuffar of Quraysh. Muslims, they would expect what was about to come, because they would not be in the lines of the believers. They would be separated. So that's why it's easier to deal with them versus dealing with hypocrites. Another thing that we have to pay attention to before we get into some of the details about the ayahs of hypocrisy, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about hypocrisy. If you can please turn off the mic over there on top. We have to also be aware of what happened during the time of Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam. During the time when he was in Mecca, there was no hypocrites. There was no hypocrites. When Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam moved to the city of Medina, people at the beginning, they were not hypocrites, but they ended up becoming later on. Not right at the beginning. So we don't see harms from hypocrisy from the beginning, but we start seeing harms of hypocrisy later on. What was at the beginning? You had these two major tribes in Medina. The tribe of Aus and the tribe of Khazraj. These were the two main tribes of Medina, Arabs. But also beside them you had three major Jewish tribes as well. Banu Qaynuqa, Banu Qurayda, and Banu Nadir. Alright, these were the three major Jewish tribes. So now, a person called Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul was considered to be like a king over these two major Arab tribes of Medina. However, during his reign, these two tribes, they had so many fights between. And as you know, when Nabi ﷺ received delegation from Medina and they accepted Islam right before going to Medina, right? He was teaching them. You had a smaller delegation, then there was another bigger delegation later on. And then the Nabi ﷺ moved to Medina. What happens now? Imagine now this king is no longer the king anymore. Because of Prophet ﷺ now coming in the city, and instead of bin Salul dealing with things that he's used to, now he doesn't have that power anymore. But rightly so, because there were so many fights. And this is not what Prophet ﷺ decided, but people themselves, they asked the Prophet to go there in the city of Medina and to be their leader as well. And because they liked his personality, they liked what he had to preach as well, they embraced Islam. 2 tribes, Aus, Khazraj, they embraced Islam. So now, bin Salul didn't have much power anymore. And the 3 Jewish tribes, they were supposed to believe, because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not invent a new religion. Christianity too was not invention of a new religion. Sayyidina Isa ﷺ was, what was he? He was a Jew, right? He was from the Yahud. He was a Jew. And he was a prophet calling them to believe in the teachings of Musa ﷺ. That is mentioned in the Bible. This is a continuation of the same faith from the family of Ali Imran, right? Zakaria, wa Maryam, Yahya, and so on. They were all rabbis and they were all righteous individuals. So he was not calling for a whole new complete religion, even though it had a new Sharia for sure, we don't doubt that, but it was a continuation pretty much. Islam too is not something brand new that humanity has never seen. No, it is a continuation of the same message that was given to Musa alayhi salam, to Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, and also to Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. Yet you see an emerging of a new Sharia, new constitution, new laws, new ways of worship. But the message, the essence is all the same. To believe in one God, worship Him, be good to the other humans and to all of His creation. That's the core message that was the same in all of these different times. So now they were supposed to believe, the Jewish tribes, because they had it written in their own books that there is going to be a prophet. And even the city of Medina was predicted that the prophet was going to come in that city. And scholars, they say that's a reason why these Jewish tribes, they were to begin with in the city of Medina there. So some of them ended up accepting the message of Prophet ﷺ. Like Abdullah bin Salam, who was, as a matter of fact, the chief rabbi. He was very well known there. And other believers as well. They ended up accepting the Islam of the Nabi ﷺ. But again, as a whole, overall, Jewish people, they decided not to. And the reason they said that we're not accepting this because we think that this prophet has to be from our offspring. It is not going to be an Arab, but it has to be a Jewish person. Even though when they go back to Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, they come from the same root, right? You have Ishaq and you have Ismail. So we say Arabs and Jews, they are cousins. But they were looking specifically to be from the offspring of Isaac. So during this time, Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul, or let's call him Ibn Salul, he started having dealings with the Jewish tribes, secret dealings, and with Quraysh as well, with the disbelievers from Quraysh who were ready to attack Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his followers. Because we know that they attacked him when he was in Mecca. So they were also looking forward to continue the attacks on him and on the believers, as they used to do in Mecca as well. So this man, he started also having his followers. Until the battle of Uhud, until the battle of Badr, the first battle, he did not think that there was going to be so much. Right? He did not think that Muslims are going to be so powerful, so victorious, and start, expanding and receiving new converts to their religion as they did right away. But when the battle of Badr took place, then he mentioned a statement that the deen of God is prevailing, referring to Islam. Like Muslims are winning now, which is good. But this was all a part of hypocrisy, as a matter of fact. This is what the scholars, they say. And it's also very important to realize that he became a reason for hundreds of people, as a matter of fact, to come back and not to fight in the battles when there was a need for soldiers to show up and to be a part of the army. In an instance, we had 300 people deserting the battle right before going to the battle. Inna buyutana awra wa ma hiya bi'awra. They were in Surah Al-Ahzab. It was during the time of the battle of Ahzab, or you had them saying that, our houses, our homes, they need somebody to overlook at them. Because as you know, when you go and you fight, if your house behind has only women and children, and there is no somebody, a man, to stay there behind, then what happens? You don't have to go and fight. You have to be in your house. But let's say there is father and there are two children, one of them stays there, then the father and the other child can go and fight the enemy. So this is one of the rules, right, of buyutuna awra, the way how they said that our houses, they don't have somebody to supervise them. So with this excuse, they left. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that that's not their principal cause. That's not why they're leaving the army, but they have other reasons. To begin with, they don't fully believe in the message, right? Because if they were true believers, then they would be on the side of the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam fighting. Now, the number of these hypocrites was increasing. It was increasing during the time as the other number of the believers was increasing tremendously. Those who were, accepting Islam by words, but not necessarily by heart, they were the victims of hypocrisy right away, very quickly. And what are the signs of hypocrisy? Ayatul munafiqi thalatha. إذا حدث كذب وإذا أتمن خان وإذا وعد أخلف وإذا أتمن خان. The signs of a hypocrite are three. When the person speaks, he lies or she lies. When he or she makes a promise, betrays that promise. When he is entrusted or she is entrusted to do something, they break that trust. So you have lying, responsibility, not fulfilling the responsibility, and when they are trusted on something, they break that trust. So this is what they were doing. Now, it's also important to note here that Banu Qaynuqa and Banu Qaynuqa, this Jewish tribe, was allied with Al-Khazraj. And later on, after Ibn Salul became less powerful, he was still the leader of Khazraj, of this tribe, Khazraj. And now, look at this. They were allies with the Jewish people, right? Jewish tribes. And Banu Qaynuqa was with Khazraj. They were the allies. And then you had Banu Nadir and Banu Qurayza, allies with Aus, the tribe of Aus. Banu Nadir and Banu Qurayza, these two Jewish tribes, allies with Aus. So Khazraj had only one, Aus had two Jewish tribes. They were in partnership, allies. What does it mean, allies? Like if...
Like backup or...
Backup, right? Friends, backup. There is, financially, transactions, buying, selling, right? So support, all of these things. Sometimes it can be described with the words of wilaya as well, right? Where they're supporters of each other. So you can see now, without necessarily going into the history and talking about the relation between Muslims later on and the Jewish tribes and their fights, without getting into there, you can see now the impact that the hypocrites had in Muslim society, the negative impact that they had, and how hard it was to fight with the enemies when you have worst enemies in your rank or in your place. The worst enemies are actually sitting in front of you. They're sitting around you. They're praising you. Bin Salul, Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul, he was praising Prophet Muhammad ﷺ right before his speeches during Friday prayers until the battle of Ahzab, and then whatever happened after that, people, they said, sit down, they said. Like your words, they have no meaning anymore. You don't have to do that for Nabi ﷺ. In other words, we know who you are. Your picture is very clear at this point. And Prophet ﷺ prohibited the followers from even calling these hypocrites or even fighting them. He left it in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even though he knew, because there was a list that he gave to Sayyidina Hudayfa. Sayyidina Hudayfa had a list of these hypocrites. Remember the story with Sayyidina Umar where he goes in, right? So he had a list. And people who say that, Prophet ﷺ was about fighting war and killing and this and that, of course these are people who want to see Muslims not progress and put a name, portray Muslims as bloodthirsty and all of that. If a Prophet ﷺ was the way how they describe to be, then he would have got rid of hypocrites who were right there in his own community. He would have gotten rid, because he knew Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Angel Jibreel alayhi salam revealed to him who the hypocrites are. And he could have gotten rid of them. And the son of Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul, he himself, after the battle of Ahzab, came to him and he said, Ya Rasulullah, he said, allow me to take his head off his body, right? To take off his head from his body. You don't have other people. His own son is saying that. And Prophet ﷺ prohibited that. He said, no. I don't want people saying that Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ is murdering his own companions. Because this is how they're seen, as companions, even though they are hypocrites. So Prophet ﷺ is using, of course, wisdom. He didn't trust for sure. He didn't give them responsibilities and all of that. But Muslims, they suffered a lot just because they were present there. And they were hearing about plans that Muslims, they were coming up with. And those plans, they would be delivered all to the enemies. And that's how harmful, they were. We have, like I said, we have to understand the background. Without understanding the background, people, again, why does the Quran speak so much about hypocrites? Why does the Quran talk about relations and war and how, they were dealing with these difficult situations and all that? How come? Well, because this is the reality, this is the context. And the Quran was coming as a guidance to guide the believers through their transitions that they were going. It was guiding them and inspiring them how to be better and how to overcome many challenges that they were facing. So now, after we know this, we can get a little bit faster with the other verses that are mentioned here in Surah Al-Baqarah. In particularly, verse, as we said, number 10, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, or verse number 9, يُخَادِعُونَ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يُخَادِعُونَ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. So these people, these individuals, right, who are hypocrites, they are in a way betraying Allah and the Prophet ﷺ. Or acting in such a way that they think that the believers are falling for them. And the Quran says, وَمَا يَخْدَعُونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ وَمَا يَشْعُرُونَ. But they're not doing that harm except to themselves. Like what they're trying to do is actually not harming God, and it is not harming the believers. But that's coming back to them. So the word here would be deceive, right? They are trying to deceive Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet, the God and the believers. But in reality, they deceive no one except themselves, though they realize it not. They are unaware of that. How do you understand that? They are trying to deceive. Of course, you cannot deceive God. Not even believers. Because no matter what you do to them, they are winners at the end. Right? They're going to be winners. Even if you make them suffer, they are winners. God is purifying them through that suffering. And you are being used as a tool, as a fitna, as a tool for them to go through that purification. In your mind, you're thinking that you are harming and you're winning, but in reality, you're being used as a tool in order for them to go through a fitna that is purifying them, and it is making a place for them in Jannah. Right? That's why the Quran says, وَمَا يَخْدَعُونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ وَلَكِنْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. They are unaware of this. That they're not in reality deceiving the believers, but they're deceiving themselves. But they're not aware of this. They go like, yeah, we just deceived them. Yeah, we just harmed them. The next ayah says, فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ فَزَادَهُمُ اللَّهُ مَرَضًا. In their hearts there is a disease or a sickness. فَزَادَهُمُ اللَّهُ مَرَضًا. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases this disease or sickness. The Ahlul Ta'wil, they gave different interpretations on this one.